She handed me a knife, and I swear I thought about using it for something else entirely. Dinner was her idea. Ribeye, medium rare, mashed sweet potatoes, jazz playing like nothing was wrong. Except everything was wrong. Because sitting 3 feet across from me was a woman who had just confessed to an affair, like she was offering me the weather report. I didn't think you'd care this much, she said, as if my silence was somehow the problem. She cut into her steak. I watched the pink juice run into the potatoes like a crime scene. I hadn't touched my plate. My fork still rested exactly where she'd placed it. The worst part? It wasn't the betrayal. It was the way she did it. She told me over dinner. Casual. Like a Tuesday night confession between chores. Then she said, "And now, I want you to decide. Him or me. Right here. No running. No hiding. Be a man for once." That part hurt. Not because she questioned my manhood. I've never been one to puff my chest and swing hammers. But because she said it in front of her sister's boyfriend, and 2 of her co-workers, who had no business being in our house in the first place. She orchestrated it. She called it a healing dinner. She wanted me humiliated, cornered, boxed into performing like some wounded circus dog. Everyone was watching me, forks paused midair. I could hear her sister whisper something like, "He deserves it." Maybe I imagined that part. Or maybe I didn't. My mouth opened once, then closed. And then, without a word, I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything or flip the table like she probably hoped for. I just walked out the front door, barefoot, no wallet, no keys. The cold hit me like a slap. I walked for hours. No destination. Just distance. I walked until my feet hurt. Until the quiet replaced the buzzing in my ears. Until I realized what this really was. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a performance. And I had just rewritten the ending by not giving them one. By the time I came back to the house, it was past midnight. The porch light was still on, casting long shadows across the welcome mat I used to clean every Sunday like it meant something. I didn't have my phone, and I was half hoping the door would be locked, but it wasn't. I opened it, stepped inside, and the smell of rosemary and shame still hung in the air. The dining room was cleared. No people, no plates, no leftover arguments. Just 2 glasses on the counter, and her scarf tossed on the back of the couch like none of it mattered. She was in the bedroom, on her side of the bed, scrolling through her phone like I hadn't just vanished for 3 hours after being emotionally executed in front of strangers. "No, where are you? No, are you okay?" Nothing. I could have been dead in a ditch or halfway to Michigan. But that was the moment I realized something far worse. She didn't care where I went, because she didn't expect me to go anywhere at all. "You left," she muttered, not even looking at me. Kind of dramatic, don't you think? I didn't answer. I walked past the bed, into the closet, pulled out my duffel, threw in enough clothes for a few days. A few months. Who knew? "You're seriously leaving?" she said behind me, voice rising now. "You're just walking away?" No apology. No explanation. Just a wounded ego. "I gave you a choice," she added. "You don't get to just skip out on that." I paused, duffel halfway zipped. That's when it hit me. She didn't confess because she felt guilty. She confessed because she was bored. She wanted a reaction. Drama. A breakdown. Maybe even a fight that would make her feel alive again. But what she got was me walking out mid-performance, and that drove her crazy. I turned to her, finally. "You didn't give me a choice. You gave me a stage." She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I zipped the bag, threw on a jacket, and walked back out into the cold. Still no yelling. Still no tears. Just the hollow echo of my footsteps on the pavement. I didn't even have a place to stay. My friend Donovan lived across town, but it was late, and I didn't want to explain everything just yet. I drove around for an hour, then parked in the empty lot behind an all-night laundromat, reclined my seat, and stared at the ceiling. That thin lining of the universe where people like me try to make sense of being gutted with a smile on their face. The texts didn't come. The calls didn't come. Because deep down, she thought I'd be back. She thought I'd crawl in through the door the next morning, mutter something about forgiveness, and pretend the betrayal was just a speed bump in a perfect suburban fairy tale. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already started mourning her months ago. I just hadn't buried the body yet. That night, I didn't sleep. And when the sun came up, I made a list. Not of things to take back, but of everything I'd never allow again. I hadn't meant to go back to the house. I told myself I wouldn't. But when you've been married for almost a decade, Your hands remember the routine better than your brain does. The next morning, I found myself parked 2 blocks away, staring at the house like it had betrayed me too. I only went inside because I realized I left my passport in the filing cabinet drawer, something you don't think about until you start planning how to disappear. She wasn't home. Probably at work, or maybe with him. The one she hadn't named yet, but whose presence dripped off her like expensive cologne. Her car was gone. The driveway empty. No neighbors around. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something I couldn't take back. I walked in slowly, like a stranger in my own life. Nothing had moved, yet everything felt rearranged, the kind of subtle off-ness that makes your skin itch. Her shoes were lined up perfectly by the door. Mine were gone. Had she thrown them out already? I didn't ask. I didn't want the answer. In the office, her laptop sat open on the desk, the screen still glowing. Maybe she forgot to close it, or maybe she wanted me to see it. Either way, I looked. I shouldn't have. There it was, an email thread, pinned to the top of her inbox. Subject line, the cabin plan. Do you know that feeling when you realize the knife in your back had fingerprints on it the whole time? The emails weren't just between her and some random guy. They were with 2 of her coworkers. The same ones who'd sat at our dinner table like passive guests while I was cornered like a wounded animal. They were planning it. The healing dinner, the confrontation, the performance, it had all been choreographed. Like a bad high school play with me as the villain and Delaney as the misunderstood lead. In one message, she wrote, "He won't fight back. He'll just shut down like always. You'll see. And if he walks out, good. That's easier than explaining everything." And then a reply from a woman named Harper. "Just keep it clean. No shouting, no mess. If he records anything, it could backfire." There it was. Proof. This wasn't an emotional breakdown or a tragic affair. It was a planned exit. And worse, a controlled demolition of our marriage. They wanted to ruin me with grace. Quiet, elegant ruin. I copied the thread to a flash drive I'd left in the drawer months ago. Just in case. Because I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. But I knew I needed the truth on my side, even if no one else cared. Before I left, I did one more thing. I walked into the bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer. My grandfather's watch was still there, the one I thought she might have pawned. I took it, slipped it onto my wrist. Because if I was going to lose everything, I wasn't going to do it on their schedule. Let them wonder where I went. Let them rehearse 1,000 apologies. Let them choke on their own silence. They'd taken the stage and given me a role. But now I was rewriting the script. And this time, I'd be the one holding the mic. 3 days. That's how long it took for her to panic. On the first day, she didn't call, didn't text. I imagine she expected me to slink back like a wet dog, tail between my legs, mumbling something about wanting to talk. She probably had lines rehearsed. Excuses in her back pocket. Maybe even fake tears if I pushed hard enough. But none of that happened. I didn't check in. I didn't give her anything. On day 2, she texted once. Just my name. Not, "Where are you?" or "Are you okay?" Just that one word, like it was supposed to pull me back into orbit. I stared at it for 20 minutes, and then turned off my phone again. But day 3, that's when things started getting interesting. I was sitting in the parking lot of the coffee shop across the street from our house, in the back of a borrowed car my friend let me use after I told him half the story. The engine was off. The windows cracked just enough to breathe. And from that angle, I had a perfect view of her pacing on the front porch in leggings and a wrinkled hoodie. Not the put-together, icy strategist who'd humiliated me during dinner. This version of her was cracking. She looked unplanned. Then the cops showed up. 2 officers. One male, one female. They didn't go in with sirens or even knock hard. Just a polite tap and some questions. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could read the panic in her movements. She was explaining, gesturing, probably telling them that I'd run off, that she was worried for me. Worried. That word almost made me laugh out loud. It wasn't until I saw her hand start to tremble that I realized what she was really afraid of. Not that I was hurt or missing. No, she was terrified that people might start asking why. And if people started digging, they'd find the same things I did. The email thread. The fake intervention dinner. The affair that was so obvious once I stopped pretending it wasn't. When the cops left, she sat on the porch alone for nearly an hour. Didn't move. Just stared at the road like she could will me to appear. Like my silence was the only thing still holding her together. I could have walked over. Could have revealed I was there the whole time. just a few hundred feet away. But I didn't. Because I wanted her to sit in it. The confusion, the guilt, the uncertainty. The same way I'd sat through months of gaslighting and emotional detachment, blaming myself for a distance I didn't create. Later that night, she called my mother. And that's how I found out exactly what she was telling people. I hadn't spoken to my mom in weeks, not out of spite, just life. But she called me in a panic around 10 p.m. She said, "You left a note," Mom whispered. "That you sounded unwell." Unwell? I hadn't left a note. I hadn't said anything. She was fabricating a narrative now, spinning it from victim to widow without a body. And the terrifying part? She was good at it. My own mother almost believed her. That was when something inside me snapped for real. Because now it wasn't just betrayal. It was character assassination. She had cheated on me, lied to me, humiliated me in my own house. But now she was trying to paint me as unstable, dangerous. She wanted sympathy. She wanted control. She wanted me silent and out of the picture, but harmless, so she could continue rewriting history without resistance. But she forgot one thing. I had the emails. I had the dates, the evidence, the motive, the backup, and more importantly, I was still alive, watching her play her final act, with no idea that the audience had already turned. She thought she had taken everything from me, but what she gave me was leverage. The thing about being quiet is that people confuse it with weakness. She never understood that about me. She thought because I didn't argue, because I never raised my voice or made ultimatums, that I was incapable of strategy, that I was soft, predictable, safe. But when you're invisible for long enough, you learn how to listen. You learn how to watch. And when the moment comes, when the entire chessboard flips, you're the only one who's ready, because everyone else thought you weren't even playing. That's why I didn't send the email to her. I sent it to her boss. Technically, I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply requested a discreet meeting regarding ethical boundaries and internal conduct, attached with the PDF of the email thread she and her coworkers wrote about me, the one that detailed how they staged my humiliation and manipulated a false narrative to justify her affair. I didn't include anything about our marriage, just her deception, her internal relationships, and the fact that company resources had been used to plan a personal ambush in the workplace setting. I used her company's language. I studied it. I used her own terms against her: intentional misrepresentation, internal manipulation of conflict to manufacture exit justification, and my favorite, weaponizing emotional optics for personal advancement. If that doesn't sound like a lawsuit waiting to happen, I don't know what does. I didn't need revenge. I needed precision. I needed the house of cards she built to collapse in on itself while I stood outside, untouched, watching through the cracks. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. She had no idea. While she was out shopping for eucalyptus-scented candles and almond milk lattes like her world was still intact, I was having coffee with her boss in the back of a downtown cafe. He showed up in a fitted blazer and the kind of posture that screamed discomfort before he even sat down. Good. That meant he took the email seriously. He didn't say much at first, just asked if I could confirm the authenticity of the messages. I handed him the flash drive, told him I was only here because I wanted no part in the destruction, but felt compelled to inform him before someone else inevitably exposed it from the inside. It wasn't a threat. It was a courtesy. By the time the coffee got cold, I could see it in his eyes. He already knew what had to happen. A woman who manipulates others into faking interventions and creating false emotional narratives to justify infidelity? That's not just morally bankrupt. It's a public relations nightmare, a leadership liability, especially in a company built on trust, branding, and emotional alignment. I never said her name in the meeting. I didn't have to. That evening, she came home earlier than usual. No warning. I had stopped sleeping at the house by then, but I left a backup cam running in the front hallway, not for legal reasons, but for truth. She stormed inside, slammed a bag on the counter, and made 3 calls in the span of 10 minutes. First to her coworker Harper, then to a guy named Max, the same one she was having the affair with. Then, last of all, she tried to call me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was trembling, not with sadness, but with fury. "You crossed a line," she hissed into the phone. "You don't get to burn everything down just because I wanted something different. If I go down, I swear to God, you're going down with me." There it was. The threat. The confession. The confirmation that, for the first time, She wasn't in control anymore. She had set the fire, and now she was choking on the smoke. But what she still didn't understand was that I hadn't started burning anything. Not yet. It was around 1:40 in the morning when I got the message that shifted everything. Not from Delaney, not from her company, but from someone I hadn't even thought to question. Donovan. My best friend. My ride or die. The one who let me crash on his pull-out couch when everything imploded. The guy who gave me his spare car keys like it was nothing. Who said, "Take your time, man," and handed me a beer while I stared blankly at the ceiling that first night. He texted me something simple. Something meant to be harmless, but it cracked open the entire shell of the past few weeks. "You still got that flash drive? I think I left some work files on it too. Mind checking?" Work files. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I replied. What files? Just some decks I exported from her machine. I was helping her with a pitch that week, remember? Should be in the cabin stuff folder. I didn't remember, because he'd never told me. I opened the drive. It had only ever held the email thread. One folder. But now I looked closer. Metadata, timestamps, file history, and a chill ran down my back. The folder hadn't been created by her. It had been created by him. Donovan had accessed her machine. Donovan had pulled the emails. Donovan had labeled the folder cabin stuff. The exact phrase I used when naming the drive. My hands started shaking. I called him. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I barely remember getting into the car. I just remember the roar in my ears, that rising pressure of betrayal that no longer had a name or a target. It was everywhere, surrounding me, choking out any last thread of clarity I thought I had. He lived 10 minutes away, but I drove like the road owed me something. When I got there, his lights were off, but his car was there. I knew he was home. I didn't knock. I didn't yell. I just stood outside, staring at the door like if I waited long enough, he'd feel it. Feel me. And then, right as I turned to leave, the porch light flicked on. The door opened, and there she was, Delaney, wearing his hoodie. For a moment, we all just stood there in silence. Her expression froze, like someone had hit pause on her face mid-emotion. He stepped in behind her, shirtless, rubbing his eyes like I'd woken him from some innocent dream. "Lowell," she started, but my name tasted like poison in her mouth now. "You didn't even wait a week," I said. Neither of them answered. And honestly, what could they say? That it was a mistake? That it just happened? That they didn't mean for me to find out this way? They didn't plan this part. That was obvious. Delaney had rehearsed betrayal with elegance. But this was raw, ugly, lazy. "You were supposed to be my friend," I said, locking eyes with Donovan. And for the first time, I saw it. Not guilt. Not shame. Relief. He didn't have to hide anymore. That was the final fracture. Not the affair. Not the fake dinner. Not the manipulation or the company drama. It was this moment, when I realized the last person I trusted had been quietly holding the knife the entire time, waiting for the right moment to twist it. I walked away. Again. No yelling. No punches. No grand speech. Just the sound of my footsteps retreating, and behind me, a door that stayed open just long enough to remind me that everything I thought I knew was dead long before I buried it. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a second. I sat in a diner off the highway, the kind that hasn't changed its menu since 1983, nursing a black coffee I didn't want. There was a crack in the window across from me that looked like a spider web, and for some reason, I couldn't stop staring at it. It reminded me of my life. One clean break, radiating outward, everything shattered, but still somehow holding together. Barely. They didn't even try to cover it anymore. Delaney and Donovan were seen together the very next day, grocery shopping, of all things, like they were just another bland suburban couple picking out oat milk and rotisserie chicken. As if I hadn't existed. As if our 10-year marriage was a rehearsal for their act. But here's the thing about betrayal. People assume the worst part is the heartbreak. It's not. It's the erasure. The rewriting of history. The way they move on while you're still choking on the smoke of everything they burned down. They told people I'd gone unstable. That I walked out for no reason. That I couldn't handle stress. Harper, her snake of a coworker, posted a vague status about emotional abuse survivors finally finding peace. Cute. It wasn't just gossip. It was a full-blown narrative. They were laying bricks for a house made of lies. And they were fast. But they'd made one mistake. They forgot I had the blueprints. The emails. The recordings. The photos. The metadata on the flash drive. And more importantly, the receipts of every single lie. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I gathered it all, every piece of proof I had. Not out of pettiness, not out of revenge, but because I realized something they hadn't. If they were going to weaponize silence, I'd make sure truth spoke louder than any scream they could fabricate. I didn't post a rage-filled essay. I didn't call them out by name. I didn't even tag them. I created a Google Drive folder labeled "For the Curious." Inside, I uploaded everything. The full email thread from the cabin plan. The audio clip of Delaney mocking me on her work trip. Screenshots of Donovan's access logs on my laptop. The forwarded voicemail she left my mother. The one where she implied I was mentally unwell. No commentary. No edits. Just facts. Then, I took one of the photos from our healing dinner, the night she tried to destroy me in front of witnesses, the one where I was just a blurry silhouette, staring into my untouched plate while everyone else smiled. And I posted it. No caption. Just the link. I thought maybe 5 or 6 people would click it. Friends. Maybe someone from work. But I forgot how fast truth travels once it's out of the cage. By the end of the week, the link had been shared over 100 times. By people I hadn't spoken to in years. Former classmates. Her coworkers. Even someone from her HR department. Delaney called me 5 days later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. This time, her voice wasn't cold. It was cracked. Scared. She asked me to take it down. Said it was getting out of hand. That people were misinterpreting things. But she forgot something crucial. I hadn't said anything. She had built her world with lies. I just turned on the lights. The day I realized I wasn't angry anymore, I laughed. It wasn't planned, and it didn't even feel like mine at first. Just this dry, raspy thing that came out of my chest while I was standing in line at a farmer's market. I had picked up a jar of honey, of all things, and something about the simplicity of it, raw, golden, unspoiled, just broke me open. In the best way. No one around me knew that I'd once been reduced to a footnote in my own marriage. That just a month earlier, I'd been sleeping in the back seat of a borrowed car, wondering how the hell everything had spiraled so far out of control. That I had walked away from the only life I had known, not because I was brave, but because it was the only thing left I hadn't tried. But there I was, holding honey, laughing. It wasn't that anything got magically fixed. Delaney and Donovan never apologized. Not sincerely. She tried, in her way, sent a long email weeks later with words like regret and poor judgment, and I wasn't myself. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not closure. Not acknowledgement. Not even accountability. You can't get apologies from people still writing lies into their own story. And that's okay. The truth had done what I needed it to do. Quietly. Cleanly. The people who mattered knew. The people who didn't, well, they could believe whatever made them feel smart. What mattered was this. I was no longer playing a part in a story that wasn't mine. I moved out of state. Not far. Just enough. Found a small place near a lake. The kind with actual silence. Not the kind you have to pretend feels peaceful while someone else is lying across the dinner table. I took freelance editing gigs again. Started doing sound design for indie films. One of them ended up getting into a festival, and for the first time in years, I watched something I made with people who clapped at the end. I started talking to someone too. Her name's Elise. I met her at a bookstore. She was arguing with the owner about how the new poetry section was alphabetized by first name instead of last. I laughed. She glared at me, then laughed too. The first thing she ever said to me was, "You look like someone who hates small talk but desperately needs a good conversation." She wasn't wrong. We've been slow. Intentionally. No performances. No power games. Just two people sitting in a lot of quiet and letting the world come back into focus. And I sleep now. God, do I sleep. Deep, dreamless, undisturbed sleep. Sometimes I wake up and forget what happened. Not because I've repressed it, but because it's over. It no longer owns me. It's just something that happened to a version of me I've already outgrown. People ask if I regret walking out that night. If I wish I'd fought harder, screamed louder, made a scene. But I don't. Because I said the most powerful thing I could say that night. Nothing. And then I left. Not as a victim, but as a man who finally understood that silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's strength. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's the first sound of peace.